Welcome to Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Being a fireman, father, veteran, husband, world record holder, and Ironman, he brings stories of experience to impact your life while challenging you to live it. What do you want from your life? Why do you want it? Are you willing to go through the challenges to get there? If you have the courage to take that first step, let this podcast be the catalyst to start your fire, while you bring the resilience to make it continue to burn. Our lives are made up of moments called right nows. So let's get started. Forged in the Fires podcast with your host, Fireman Rob, begins now.
Today's guest, he wrote a book that we're going to talk about. It's Let Her Play. He's the CEO of Money Club. He's a great speaker, just a dynamic person overall. Aaron Velky, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Dude, I am happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I like the energy. Sometimes when we do these, some people start off slow and then they extend, but you're starting off high. I like it. I think that if there is anything you can bring to add value, it's good energy, and it's a lot of energy. I love that. Has that been your kind of the way that you've been since a kid?
Maybe not since a kid. I would say that in the last 4 or 5 years, that's been a bigger part of how I feel comfortable is to be high energy. And I was really afraid of making other people uncomfortable by doing that for a long time. Oh, really? And now I'm much more confident in just, this is who I am. This is how I show up. It's how I want to show up. And if that makes you uncomfortable, there's some work that we need to do.
What was that change that made it like 5 years ago? What was that change in the mindset?
I think I gave less shits about making people uncomfortable.
I love that. But that is so true, because so many people are so worried about what other people think about what they do and what they say. Now, that actually leads perfectly into a book that you wrote, Let Her Play. So now, you don't have any girls, right?
I don't. I just had my first kid 4 months ago, and that book I wrote that and published it in 2020. So it was written before I was even a dad.
So that I love it. But you've been a coach. You had multiple years of experience of coaching girls, and so you wrote this book. What was the premise behind writing it? For females directly. So I had to deal with a lot as a coach to female athletes, things that I wasn't necessarily ready for as just a young man. And after doing it for a long time, I just got frustrated. I think me being disconnected from the parenting experience for a long time was a reason not to write. Right. And when you're around the same situation over and over, and you stand for the same thing over and over, and you have the same dialogue and the same confrontation regularly on repeat, you eventually stop caring whether or not someone disagrees with you, and you just have the conversation. And the book was this. It's essentially the writing of the same conversation I would have at the beginning of every season, the same conversation I would have at every touch point when a parent was upset about playing time or anything like that. Right. And it was almost a chronicle of what I learned as a non-parent about what the girls needed. And because I was just a third party to them and was, yes, a counselor, I was coach, I was sometimes older brother, I was sometimes like stand-in dad. I played a lot of roles. Right. They told me a lot of truth about what they needed and what they wanted from a leader. And that was very different than what I got as a kid and from what I saw them getting from their parents. And it just felt like at some point, someone's got to make a stand for this. And that was my job. I love that. And the tagline is the unfiltered guide to empowerment through sport. And I think, it's so true, not only for females, but for males. Sport is a great learning field, isn't it?
Oh, it's in my opinion, it's the learning center for everything. It's changed my business. It's changed my life. It's changed my communication. It's changed my work ethic. All the success principles that you find in sports can be translated to every other arena of life.
That's so true. That's so true. Now, when you were younger, I didn't find this. What sports were you big in?
So I played soccer since I was able to walk.
Oh,
And so that was my saving grace, man. That got me through the hard times of isolation in high school and was my like safety and zen. I played volleyball through high school. I played a little bit like on my club team in college.
Okay.
I played after that. I dabbled in a bunch of things. You know, we played basketball on the like periods of recess and summer breaks and all that. You know, we did football. We played tackle and two-hand touch on fields during vacations and all that. But the only sports I played really like team organized were soccer and volleyball.
Okay. Yeah, and that's so funny because it's like, and you coached soccer for girls, correct?
I did, yeah, for about 12 years.
So, what was that like? Because I've talked to, I had Kelly Sheffield, who's the volleyball coach for the University of Wisconsin. What was that? How did that mentality? Because you talked about it a little bit, but how did that mentality of you coaching change from once you started coaching females to as you progressed down the line? Because it's a different mentality than you were used to when you were in soccer, right?
Yeah, it was incredibly different. You know, when coaching boys, so I started coaching boys. When coaching them, aggression and energy was the focal point of my conversations, whether it be halftime or otherwise.
Right.
With the girls, I had to be a bit more intentional with my words, with my language, with my tonality. And I think that it's an over stereotype to say, well, girls are more sensitive. What mattered, though, is that girls were more attentive.
Right.
They were really listening at a very, very deep level. And what I had to pay more attention to is what's the memo that I'm sending behind the words? Because they were able to pick up on the memo behind the words. And I, as a coach to these young women, I had to be a better dude. I had to be just a better man. And that was really early in my life. And it really put a tremendous new lens on my eyesight in the world, where I was now experiencing what a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old girl was experiencing in the world of having to be like everything, man. It was like they were in a pressure cooker of every capacity. How they looked, how they dressed, how they talked, how they performed academically, how they performed athletically. All these things, and there's this pressure on them to experience life through the filters that the world has presented rather than their own. And the things I dealt with between eating disorders, mental disorders, confidence tears, physical tears, parental challenges, being emotionally neglected, like some of these things I was just not ready for.
Right.
And I didn't have an option. I had to just step up. And that was how I grew as a person and how I grew as a man.
I think that's such a powerful statement because, it's not that we're pointing out the differences in females and males, but it's like you won in 2018, the BBB Better Business Bureau Spark Award for companies that bring strong culture and workplace engagement to their teams. And it's when you look at that kind of award, you understand why you probably got it, because you understand many different things that a lot of people maybe don't dive into because they're scared of it, right?
You're completely right. The dynamics of coaching a girls' soccer team taught me everything about how to care at a deeper level than most. And I think there's a really simple correlation between culture on a team and, culture on a team. Like, we have abstracted workplace culture to seem like this distant identity that people just can't tap into. And the reality is that workplace culture is simply the behavior that leaders embody. Whether they're intentional or not is usually the disorder. But It's what does a leader do regularly? What are the patterns? What are the conversations that happen? And I don't know that anything could have taught me better how to pay attention to what was going on when I wasn't paying attention.
Right. That's a great statement. I don't know if, I love that statement because it's so true. Now, transitioning to kind of the next stage, like, Money Club. I want to talk about Money Club because you did some great things about, I think it's so valuable to teach your kids about money. And you did a train the trainer platform. Tell me more about that.
Well, Money Club's an interesting story because through coaching, one of the observations was that kids were learning a lot of things, almost the same things that I learned, and weren't learning about money, entrepreneurship. They weren't learning about the way the world works underneath the surface. And
right.
So we essentially built a sport out of money, and we're deploying that in the Baltimore DMV, Pennsylvania area. And that like couldn't scale. We knew that it had traction, but it couldn't scale. And the transitions that we made, some of the growth, the decisions that we made were all around how do we get more people to learn? And there were two really interesting observations during this. One, teachers don't feel comfortable teaching it. And I get it. Like teachers are some of my favorite people, and I know how hard they work. And I think it is the most significantly undervalued like career that we have here in this country.
Right.
And underpaid. So I understand why they don't feel comfortable teaching it. However, that's largely just an excuse for the education system to say, well, we don't need to teach it. And I think that's false as well. The other observation was that in order to teach someone about money, unless they're actively making money choices, which most kids are not, most of the focal point needs to be on our relationship with money, which is social, it's emotional, it's about the way we feel. It's the reason that we make certain decisions. It's about our attitude and our values. And most of the education that we found was trying to really impart all this mechanical knowledge to someone that isn't going to be making a lot of use of it. And many terms in money are really ambiguous, like interest. Yeah. It's good and bad. It's very dependent on the circumstance. And when you throw a lot of those mechanics out to kids, they're as confused as I get.
Yeah. How when you're talking to kids too, because it's, I know with my kids, it's, now I have some money, it's time to go out and use it.
Yeah.
Right. That's the normal of kids. But how do you convert it into, like you're saying, a lot of the terms for money is hard for kids to understand. How do you correlate that to, maybe some of your life experiences or some of the things that you did with coaching?
That's a really good question. So there's a lot of responsibility that parents have to learn themselves so that they can model behavior and show their kids the way.
Right.
And we've done a lot of adult education since 2020. So we have tools for that. But I think that generally speaking, the danger that young adults face today financially is that everything is so fast from a receiving perspective of what we buy. So we can get something in 2 days, we can get it in 24 hours, we can get it right now, we can click and buy, in 10 seconds, and we can generally get the product really quickly. What has happened though over time is we've extended the length of time before payment is due. And that creates a really interesting ripple when you get almost addicted to yes and yes and yes now. And as a consequence, you can just defer. What you end up creating is a very vicious cycle of, I will deal with this later. And from a financial perspective, that is part of the reason that we have a landslide of millennials and below who are unable to make big financial choices or to even get out of the deluge that is day-to-day, like paycheck to paycheck behavior because of this division between the reward and the consequence.
Do you think that, because that's the biggest thing, I think you hit it on the head, is that so many people can't handle delayed gratification anymore?
Well, I would say that there's a handling of it that's critical, but the bigger misconception I find is that there's not enough information, or maybe it's just conversation happening around why delayed gratification is better. So if I'm given two options, have the ice cream now or have the ice cream tomorrow, my brain can't really wrap around have ice cream tomorrow. I can kind of understand it. Maybe I can be excited about it, but that like really skews the conversation because it's one today or one tomorrow. And really the objective of delayed gratification is to show someone that it's one today or 8 tomorrow. And very few circumstances actually help a young adult or an adult understand that it's 1 to 8. And that's where we fail to make delayed gratification a simple paradigm versus a very complicated like negotiation almost.
Do you think it's harder for if as a child, when you're growing up, if you didn't have that kind of understanding or that correlation, is it harder for adults to break that cycle of needing that?
Oh yeah. The way that we're wired, once we have set certain habits, once we've begun to build a lifestyle, it becomes much harder to break it than anything else. You know, it's really easy to set habits and patterns when you like get to college or when you leave college. And that's because you're dealing with an overwhelming amount of change at once and none of your prior systems work. So you just adapt and you evolve. But largely after college, you don't experience major life change unless you willingly move cities, change jobs in a major way, or completely quit your job and lean into entrepreneurship. You just don't have that kind of catalyst for massive change. And when you look at financial behavior, most of the things that get someone where they want to go in the long run, when they think about retirement or wealth or really amassing something significant, it's built on small day-to-day decisions, not like it's not like a massive one day kind of moment. It's usually a $5 a day, $10 a day, $20 a day habit that makes it happen.
That's so true. And I mean, that's a great correlation for the money aspect as well as life, because it is day-to-day decisions that can lead you to be, I love how you have on your website, courageously human. It's day-to-day decisions that help you to be that courageous human.
Yeah. You know, I'm my entire brand almost now is largely based on 3 things. Clarity. Do you know what you want? Do you know where you are? Do you know what your values are? Context. Do you understand how what you're experiencing, whether it be hardship or success, is relevant to where you want to go and what it's teaching you and what you're learning and adapting? And then courage. Can you make big choices? Can you take big action? Can you lean into something that you've never done before? And to me, those 3 things are what have changed my life and what I help a lot of people do now. But courage is a word that's interesting because we tend to think of someone courageous or someone brave as someone that just charges in and makes it happen. And I actually think that you can't be courageous unless you're terrified.
Yeah, so that's very true. It's very true. Yeah, because I think a lot of people think that firefighters don't have a fear of fire, but we have a healthy fear. There's that difference between having a fear that debilitates you and that having a healthy fear, so that when you go after it, that you're not debilitated, but you're not overly confident that everything will go all right.
I think that firemen in so many ways have to be some of the bravest people on the fucking planet.
We're dumb too.
Yeah.
We have our moments.
Hey, you know, maybe there's some of both in there, right? You have to be dumb to your own fear.
Yeah.
I know that takes a tremendous amount of courage, and to make a choice in the optimistic sense that you will be assisting someone else through not only your fear, but their fear, that is next level. I have so much respect for that.
And it's interesting because like when you're talking about kids, and I always love to go back to like what you're talking about, is kids have to deal with that so much more nowadays than we did. I always talked about, you were talking about the different things that when you're coaching on a girls team that they had to deal with. And I think this really lies. I love the quote that you have from Dostoevsky. I think I totally obliterated that name, but
I don't know how to say it either very well.
It's a lot of vowels and stuff. I don't know how to be silent when my heart is speaking. And I think that is the hardest thing for kids to do nowadays, is to have that passion and have that purpose and really verbalize that, because there's so many platforms that can bring them down.
That's a really powerful statement. I agree. There are a lot of platforms, simultaneously. So here's the glass half full mentality.
Yeah.
There are also so many platforms for anyone to share their voice.
Love that.
I think that collectively, we, especially here in the US, we have created so much opportunity for someone to share what's on their heart and mind. You do have to have a miraculous amount of courage to do it initially. Eventually, it just becomes your status quo and your regular MO. But
right.
Generally, there are ways that you can stand for something. And I'm not talking about like activism and those kinds of protests. I mean, to stand for a value that you really, really live by. Right. And while there are a lot of platforms that can completely eradicate confidence and someone's sense of self, there are a lot of ways that someone can reach people now that never existed before.
That's so true. I love how you turned that around. That's it's not a surprise that you're good at what you do.
Glass half full, man. A lot of practice.
I love that. I love that. Now, when you're talking about being able to motivate, and I see that you do speaking, you do coaching. What is it? Because I think a lot of people go, "Oh gosh, these coaches and these speakers are always up." How do you get yourself to a different point when, maybe it's not the greatest day for you, but how do you get yourself to the point to continue to motivate and activate and impact others, even on those tough days?
Motivation is not a consistent energy source. Motivation is largely an emotional state. I feel motivated is an emotional statement. So it registers in the wrong place. What is more important to understand is habits and systems. We'll call it routines, call it practices. When we overemphasize motivation, which we do a lot in the space of like personal development, what we end up creating is an addiction to an emotion. And as soon as that dissipates, we end up losing our way, deflated, and less productive, if productive at all. When you start to grow and change a lot, motivation is a really important factor. But once you've gotten a baseline, motivation has to be a secondary rocket thruster. It can't be your main fuel source. I believe that when we figure out our values and we develop a very core why, a purpose for what we do and why we do it, we can almost circumnavigate the need for motivation. And when your why is large enough and you're clear on your values, you almost have a governing system of why an action is necessary, the reason you're undergoing a certain amount of growth. But generally, the individuals that I find are struggling the most is someone who's waiting for motivation, waiting for an emotion.
Yeah.
And as long as you're dictated, especially from a productivity standpoint on motivation, you are like a flag in the wind. When there is no wind, you have no visibility. And when there's wind, you're on fire. And I have had to ride the ups and downs. I've had tremendous challenges in my life that have crippled my motivation. And underneath that is still a commitment to practice a routine, a regularity with what I stand for and demonstrating my values in the world. And I think anyone listening that really wants to make a change in the world or change in themselves has to find a way to dig deeper than motivation.
Yeah. Wow. That was powerful. So one of the things I want to make sure that anybody who has any questions or anything like that, the place that you can go to is Aaron Velky. It's AARONVELKY, commonspelling.com.
Yeah,
right? Or the other site that you can go to is whereourmoneyclub.com. Aaron, your insight is amazing, and definitely I appreciate you being on. I always end with the same 3 questions. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Yes.
You're not prepared, are you? All right. If you could go back to your 18-year-old self and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
I would tell myself that the more I tried to get people to like me, the further away from me that I got, and that I was enough just as I was.
That's a great statement. I hope all the young ones that are listening are making sure to take notes on that one, and the parents. All right, here's the second one. So many people are struggling always, and they wake up and they're just trying to get onto their day. What are 2 pieces of advice, 2 habits that you'd say incorporate into your life daily, and it's going to help you to continue to move forward?
Struggle has purpose. As long as there's a lesson in struggle, it can be managed. And that is one important lesson that I've had to take away. If it feels purposeless, it just feels like torment. And right. If you can give your struggle purpose by saying, what lesson am I learning? What is this teaching me? What am I missing? Those questions can help you turn out of torment and into struggle as a catalyst for change. The other thing I would encourage someone to understand or perhaps listen to deeply is that most of what you may see as success on the outside is largely like imagery and not necessarily real. Success is a documented journey of a variety of wins, absolutely, but a large amount of doubt, uncertainty, failure, struggle, loss, fatigue, and most of the stories of success that we read are only the highlight reels. And I think that the experiences that I've had with really dark emotions, with things like depression, with navigating other people's emotions, all the same, right. We forget that we are not the only person that has experienced this along the journey of success.
That's a great way. Those are 2 habits that I just wrote down. So I'm using your stuff. So the last one is always the most fun. So if you could have coffee at a firehouse table. So in other words, any questions are not off the table. You can ask anything. With 3 people, they can be deceased or alive. Who would those 3 people be and why?
Dang.
I always like to stump the good guests.
Yeah, this is a good question. You said dead or alive?
Dead or alive?
Dead or alive. Well, one of my favorite artists is a guy named Frank Ocean. I would love to have a conversation with him. His whole story and his music have been resonant through my world for a lot of years. I would love to sit down with him and just talk music and expression and the way he made a career out of such vulnerability. I would absolutely love to sit down with a divisive figure like Henry VIII. That is a really old school person, but there's almost nothing I've read about that guy that is positive. And it would be really something.
He was born.
Yeah, like no literature paints this guy as a positive figure. And I just think it'd be fascinating to sit with him and be like, dude, what's going on, man? And see if he's really as vile as he's made out to be.
That's good.
And I think it would be a fascinating conversation to sit with. There's a YouTuber, I'm missing his name. He made an entire career out of responding to YouTube videos without making any words or sounds.
Really?
And he would just respond to these. What is his name? Oh man.
That's crazy.
So what he would do is he would see someone taking a long-winded approach to something, and he would just show it in 30 seconds and take these really complicated meme videos and do it without sounds or speaking. And he built a massive following. I'm trying to find his name really quickly.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah. So he's been really successful on YouTube, on these other platforms, and has just built up a huge brand out of making fun of other people through like simplification as the theme.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find his name. I know it, but it's not on the tip of my tongue. The fact that he could take videos and platforms like YouTube,
right,
respond to individuals making creative efforts and not even talk and make a tremendous living out of it blows my mind.
That is crazy. I love it. Well, hey, it's been an absolute honor to have you on, Aaron, and definitely I know everybody took a lot away from what you just told us. So thanks so much for being on here today.
I appreciate you, Rob. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening and supporting the Forged in the Fires podcast with Fireman Rob. Remember, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast, and please share this episode with a friend or family. To find out more about Fireman Rob or reach out about a question, go to www.firemanrob.com. Until next time, live your life forged in the fires.